Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll get started shortly, but please be patient while we allow all of our attendees to enter the call. And please note that this event will be recorded. And if you have questions for our guest, please add it to the Q&A box. Thank you.
All right, we're live.
Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who are joining this call from around the world. I'm Ann Hesse, and it's my honor to lead the Democrats Abroad Global Women's Caucus. We are thrilled to have Florida Congresswoman Lois Frankel with us today to talk us through the latest developments in Washington and tell us what's up in Florida as well. So, I'm joined in hosting today by Democrats Abroad International Chair Candace Carriston and Carol Moore, who co-chairs our GWC Women's Economic Empowerment Initiative and our DA Florida State Outreach Team. We've also invited a panel of members and leaders from a wide variety of DA caucuses and committees to share their questions with the Congresswoman. And to all of you listening in, please remember that we'll be gathering questions for our guests from the Zoom Q&A box and on Facebook, where we're streaming live now. So you're welcome to type in your questions as we go along. And don't worry if we aren't able to get to all your questions today. We'll be sending them along to the representative after the call. We thank our special guest and all our attendees for joining us today and look forward to a stimulating conversation. I'll hand off to Candace now, who will lead our discussion. Candace?
Great, thank you, Ann, and welcome everyone to this really special event. My gratitude to you, Ann, and the whole Global Women's Caucus, and to Carol as well with the Florida State team, and of course to our fabulous special guest, Representative Lois Frankel. Very honored to have you join us today and speak with Democrats Abroad. As Ann mentioned, my name is Candace Carriston, and I serve as the International Chair of Democrats Abroad. For those of you who might not be as familiar with us, we are the largest organization of US citizens living outside of the United States, and we're also an official arm of the Democratic Party. At our core, it's our mission to provide Americans abroad a voice in our government and to elect Democratic candidates by mobilizing the overseas vote. With your help, we thankfully did this in 2020. We can say with certainty that the votes from abroad are what secured Biden's wins, not only in Georgia, but also in Arizona. And now for some states, it's time to do it again already. So if you're listening and you happen to vote in New Jersey, Virginia, or Ohio Congressional Districts 11, that's the Cleveland area, or Ohio Congressional District 15, that's the Columbus area, do not forget to request your ballot at votefromabroad.org for the November 2nd elections happening in your areas. Lastly, if you aren't yet a member, I invite you to join by going to democratsabroad.org. Membership is open to all US citizens who will be 18 years of age by the next federal election, and it's free. Although I do have to say that as an all volunteer run and donation funded organization, we are extremely grateful for any contribution you can make for today's event. You can head over to democratsabroad.org/donate. We really do appreciate your support as we gear up for such an important midterm cycle. And again, thrilled to have you with us today and thrilled to have Congresswoman Frankel with us. I'll hand it off to Carol Moore now, who will introduce her.
Thank you, Candace. It is an honor to welcome my friend and my Congresswoman for Florida 21, Lois Frankel. She's here today to talk to Democrats abroad about what is happening in Congress to advance the Biden legislative priorities. Will the programs supporting women and families get passed, Lois? Also, how can Democrats fight back in Florida with Republicans in control in Tallahassee? Finally, the biggest question, how can we work with Congress to protect our democracy under this unprecedented attack from most of the elements of the Republican Party? Lois and I are actually contemporaries. We both left law school in the early 70s when sex discrimination was still rife, but opportunities were opening up under pressure from what we now call the second wave of feminism. Lois had moved to Florida to practice law, and she was already engaged in working to promote equal opportunity. She was a founding member of the Florida chapter of the National Organization for Women Now. Fast forward to today, and not only are women's rights under attack, but also civil rights. And as the pandemic continues, racial and economic inequalities are worsening. Lois has dedicated her career to fighting these battles and is well grounded at the forces in play. She served 14 years in the Florida State Legislature, 8 years as mayor of West Palm Beach, and is now in her 5th term in Congress. She is a dynamo. She serves on the House Appropriations and Veteran Affairs Committees. She co-chairs the House Democratic Women's Caucus and is active on numerous other committees and caucuses. And Lois has agreed to join the House Americans Abroad Caucus, which Representative Carolyn Maloney is in the process of expanding. So thank you, Lois, for joining us today at this critical junction for our country. I now turn the floor over to you.
Oh, thank Carol. So now I'm going to have you travel with me to give my introductions. Thank you. So, pardon me, I have a little bit of a cold. I have a little grandson who's in his first year preschool, and it's just one cold after another, but it's part of the blessing, right? First of all, how exciting to be with all you today. I hope that you can each put in the chat, let me know what country you're living in. My first several years in Congress, I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and that was an incredible opportunity. I got to travel all over the world, probably not where most of you are. We went to mostly very dangerous war zones, but it was still an incredible time. So yeah, let me know where you are today. So, okay, it's coming in, fantastic. Carol, thank you, and to the Democrats abroad. I wanted to add one thing. There is another election going on right now in Florida. It's Alcee Hastings' open seat. That's Florida District 20. And that primary is in November, and there'll be a general in January. So people, if you live in that area in Florida, please get your ballots in there too. Okay. You know, sometimes I say, just turn off the cable news. I don't know how much cable news you get of the US in overseas. Oh, probably not too much, I hope, because they've really been focusing, I think, on the wrong thing about what's going on in the Congress with the Build Back Better. And let me just say about Build Back Better, it is, what we're talking about is transformational. It is big. And keep in mind that we have over 220 Democrats in the House and 50 in the Senate. And obviously the president is a Democrat, and trying to get a meeting of the minds on something this big is taking understandably a while, and it should, because this is not simple legislation that we're dealing with. It's going to have an impact on millions and millions of people. And it's going to take a lot of stress, especially off of working people, and it's going to really prepare the future for our children in a lot of ways, socially and also in fighting the climate change. So yeah, it does take more than a minute to figure it out. And you know, what happened was we gave ourselves, I think, a false deadline, which was about a month ago, to try to get everything done so quickly. And that has just, you know, all that's now, they're just saying we can't get our act together. We can't get our act together. Well, the fact is we just had unfortunately, it's one of those, a self-inflicted wound by promising that we would finish it up before we really were able to. But let me just say, I'll tell you some of the transformational pieces of Build Back Better, and that is in the care industry, getting childcare, making it more affordable and more accessible in this country, and home care for our elderly and for our disabled, also making it more accessible and more affordable, with both industries raising the compensation for our care community. They are one of the most underpaid folks, mostly women of color, and doing our most important work. So it's very, very important that we get those wages raised. And so that's a big part of this Build Back Better legislation. And then, of course, we want to continue the child tax credit, which, believe it or not, took half of our children out of poverty this past few months when we started to implement it. So we definitely want to continue that. There is a fight, let's say a fight. There's a disagreement with the House and the Senate on the paid medical leave piece of the legislation. We are the only developed country in the world that does not offer a paid family leave option paid for by the government. And 80% of our workers here are not covered by any kind of plan. So the debate going on behind the scenes is how many weeks would that cover? So that's still in discussion. Also, a big part of the discussion is Medicare expansion. That is a very costly part of this package. It would have Medicare paying for, or at least partially paying for, the hearing, the vision, and the teeth and the dental care for people. And that is a fierce debate, especially in the Senate. Keep in mind that the House, we really actually, when I say we have our act together, it's obviously easier to pass something in the House than in the Senate, because in the Senate, you just need one or two people who are holding back. In the House, we have like a margin of 6. So if we can get 6 less recalcitrant people, we can pass something. So those are probably, and then another really big piece, very, very important, which is the we call the green part of the bill, which will create millions of jobs, and really the focus will be to cut our carbon emissions. And that'll be a big piece of the bill. So I think I've highlighted what the kind of things we're debating right now. And here's the timetable. Again, we're giving ourselves another timetable, because the fact of the matter is we really didn't have to, we want to get this done by the end of the year, but we didn't really have to get it done by September 30th or now it's October 30th. And the reason I say October 30th, this is going to get a little bit into the weeds, but in understanding how these dates popped up. We have what's called surface transportation bill, which actually is a huge piece of legislation where we authorize and fund surface transportation all over the country, whether that's roads and bridges and transit and so forth. And that expired at the end of September, and that's why there was a push to try to get everything done by the end of September, so that we could do the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which takes the place of the surface transportation, and also the Build Back Better, which is also a jobs bill, but more also oriented towards family and climate issues. So the surface transportation bill, now again, we extended it, but that's going to expire now at the end of this month. So I do think it is a goal of our leadership to try, if at all possible, to have everything resolved by the end of the month. And I will just say that's asking a lot, but that's the crux of what's going on. I personally still feel very optimistic we're going to get it done. And I can answer any more questions you might have on it. Florida, you asked me about Florida. Okay, well, I always every 2 years, I feel so optimistic that we're going to get the job done here in Florida, and then I get disappointed. Obviously, this state is a difficult one, but we do have, I just say this, we have our governor, I call him Ron Death Santis. He is in a race to the bottom with Greg Abbott in Texas. They're in a race to see who can be crazier, who can be more pro-COVID. That's what I think it's about. And so his policies here, he's been fighting with all the school boards who want to require mask wearing. He's threatening the businesses and the public governments that are requiring vaccination. He's a one man. I'm trying to be polite, but to me, he is a type of domestic terrorist. Oh gosh, that would get me in trouble to say that. But really, this is a terrible, terrible governor whose goal is to be a president of the United States, and who, in my opinion, is putting his political ambition above the health and safety of the people who are living here in Florida. And that's just on COVID. I'm not even going to get into his other policies, many which are now being even held unconstitutional by courts. So, but we do have some really good candidates. We have running for the Senate is Val Demings, who you probably are aware of, who's running against Marco Rubio. And she's got the support of Emily's List. She's doing very well with her fundraising. She's very a dynamic person, and she's going to give Marco a run for his money. The Democratic primary is going to get a little bit of a mix-up, I think, soon. Right now, we have Nikki Fried, who's our agriculture secretary, and Charlie Crist, who's a member of Congress, former governor, in the primary. But there is talk that Annette Taddeo, who is a state senator down in Miami, who was Charlie Crist's running mate the last time he ran for governor, that she's going to hop in. Part of the challenge that they're going to have, I mean, their policies are going to be much more, I think, in mainstream with people who live here. DeSantis, though, is his war chest is huge, and really, every time he puts forward one of his crazy policies, it's ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching on the digital fundraising, because there are a lot of very, very right-wing people, and even if they're just sending in $10 or $20, that's where he's raising his money big time. So that's going to be an issue there. But I think we should remain optimistic and strong and fight back. So we've seen how close elections have been. We don't know yet what people are saying, well, the president, he's not popular, this and that. Listen, folks, it's too early to really judge right now what's going to happen a year from November. Because I do think Democrats are going to get the job done in Congress, and that's going to really change the dynamics of the political landscape. And then I see someone asking me whether Gillum was going to run for governor. No, Gillum had some kind of incident with I don't know, I won't even get into it, but I think Gillum's political career is somewhat sidetracked right now for quite a while, if forever. So, okay, so that's where we are in terms of Florida. And Carol, instead of me just going back and back, why don't we start to take questions, and I can just fill in any gaps. In the meantime, I'm going to look at the chat and see where everybody's.
That's great, Lois. Thank you so much. And Candace is going to call on some of our members to ask you some questions, starting with Sally Schwartz.
Yeah, thank you, Congresswoman. And absolutely right. We're certain with Democrats like you leading the way in Washington, as well as those at the state and local levels, we're certain that Democrats are going to get the job done, no doubt about it. But there's still a lot of work ahead. And I think we have a question from, as Carol mentioned, from Sally Schwartz, who lives in France and is a Pennsylvania voter. And she is also the founder of the Global Women's Caucus. And I think she has a question for you about some existing legislation that's in the pipeline. Sally?
Thanks, Candace. Yeah, hi, Lois. Thank you so much for the time you're giving us. We really appreciate it. I actually head up the reproductive justice task force within the Global Women's Caucus. And I have a question for you. As you well know, we did manage to get the Women's Health Protection Act through the House. But we're fighting an uphill battle through Texas legislation, through the Supreme Court issue that are coming up. And my question to you is the Women's Health Protection Act going to fix all that? And if so, how are we going to get it through the Senate? Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks for that question. It is, you know, when I reflect back over my lifetime, you know, you get to a certain age where you don't remember everything, right? But there's one thing I do remember really well. When I was about 15 years old, my friend I would say my friend was missing. I went to look for her, and I found her in bed, just covered with blood. And it turned out that she had had this was obviously before Roe v. Wade, and she had had what we called then a back alley abortion. And we were able to save her life. But, you know, that's just one story of what was going on back then. I mean, literally hundreds of thousands of women some were losing their lives, some were being maimed. What we learned is making abortion illegal or difficult does not stop abortion. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, I think we can all agree is this: there's probably nothing more personal than the decision of whether to bring a child into the world. And that decision should not be made by a politician, your neighbor, by some vigilante, which is what like Texas is allowing. It's a personal decision to be made by the person and whoever that person trusts to make that decision with them. So, you know, that's the value that we really fight for. And what we've seen since Roe v. Wade is over 1,300 laws that have been passed in Republican legislatures all across the country, including some here in Florida, some laws here in Florida, that obstruct the access to abortion. And this has been so successful that in 90% of counties in this country, there is no abortion clinic. And in 5 states, there's maybe one. Now we know, of course, in Texas, it's an impossibility. What a crazy, crazy, mean-spirited law the Texas law is, which not only bans abortions before most women would even know, or anybody who's pregnant would know that they're pregnant, and which actually puts a bounty on people who are helping with an abortion. Even an Uber driver who drives someone to an abortion clinic is a $10,000 bounty on these people's heads. So, and it was very discouraging and alarming that the Supreme Court wouldn't even allow a discussion on it. And even more alarming is that the Supreme Court is now back in session, and they're going to take up a Mississippi bill that also could really mean the end of Roe v. Wade if the Supreme Court wanted to go in that direction. So, you know, what does the Women's Health Protection Act? The Women's Health Protection Act does basically codifies or puts into law Roe v. Wade. And it prohibits any state from either blocking abortion totally or creating unnecessary medical access. The good news is that it passed in the House with every Democratic vote except for one. No Republicans, but this is the first time that we've been able to do that. So that's progress. Now, the Senate, what's happening in the Senate is what's happening with most of our legislation. And we have passed we've passed legislation on voting rights. We've passed legislation on gun violence, on campaign finance reform. These bills are sitting in the Senate because they have the filibuster rule and they need 60 votes to get past legislation unless it's part of what's called a reconciliation package, which really only deals with spending, not with policy, changes in policy. It deals with spending. So I took the long way, but just to try to educate everybody with what this Women's Health Protection Act, the reason for it. It's going to take Democrats winning back the House and getting that 60 vote majority in the Senate, or the public putting enough pressure on the senators that are there to pass this legislation.
Hey, I'd like you to know that our Global Women's Caucus, especially the reproductive justice team, has been fighting really, really hard. And when it was ready to pass the House, we did a Twitter campaign, and our team is really going like crazy. And we stand ready to help you fight in the Senate when the time comes. All you have to do is give us a phone call, give Carol a call, and we're ready to go. We have other teams on our Global Women's Caucus. They're all just really working very hard. So the next question will come from Pat White, who is the co-chair of the GWC Women's Economic Empowerment Team, also a really, really crucial team, which she co-chairs with Carol. And she lives in France and she votes in South Carolina. So I'd like to have Pat come on now and ask her question.
Thank you. Lois, thank you so much for joining us today. My question centers on a part of government where resolutions and solutions should be easier to obtain, which is within the president's office and the various cabinets. The question is that the Democratic Women's Caucus identified several policy proposals as executive actions that the Biden-Harris administration could advance that would put gender front and center. One of them, for example, was the pay equity and leadership audit in federal agencies. My question to you then is, what is the caucus's assessment of the progress on those actions?
Okay. Well, thank you. Now you're testing my memory there, but I will just say this. I can tell you on the top of my head what some really good first victories. Number one, the president did form a gender council, and he has very good people. You know, one of the ways and you can tell this is a very progressive president, and his policies on women have been terrific. And I just know from talking to the women who are surrounding him how positive his agenda is. So he created this gender council that will focus a lot on the women's issues. He just changed the Title 10 policy. If you remember that one of the first things that President Trump did was to change Title 10 to I said he put the domestic gag rule on steroids when he took away Title 10 funding is money that is used to fund reproductive care and health care, especially for in the underserved communities in our country. And President Trump put in a rule. I mean, the law did not permit the use of money for abortion, but he put in a rule that said you can't even mention the word. And if somebody goes to, for example, a Planned Parenthood facility, and that person is pregnant and says, "What's my options?" Under the gag rule that the president put in, they couldn't even tell them their options. And so what happened is healthcare providers that wanted to tell the truth and give, complete and full truthful information had to turn down Title X money. And so millions and millions of dollars were lost from providers like Planned Parenthood, but not only Planned Parenthood, health clinics all over the country who did not want to be gagged. Anyway, Biden's administration, they had to go through rulemaking to reverse it, and that was just announced either last week or the week before. So we're very happy about that. And I think you mentioned the
Pay equity.
yeah, the taking a look at the how people are being paid, especially in the major corporations. And then, of course, if you look back, Build Back Better, what he's put in there, paid family leave, child care tax credit, raising the wages of the workers in the care community, and also getting access for the customers to make it more affordable and more widespread. So really terrific policies that this president is moving forward with. And I feel very good that I'll have to take a look at my list. Maybe if I have a staff member on this today, they can send me the list and I can comment on it, because we gave him a very long list.
We've got the letter. We've got the letter.
I tell you what,
January.
yeah, you know what? The one which is a little still disappointing to me, which is pertinent to this group, is he has yet to appoint his ambassador on women's global issues.
Yes.
He's not done that yet, so we're a little bit disappointed on that one. We're still trying to obviously he will do that, and we're lobbying on that. Because there are so many, mainly what girls' education has really been ravaged by the COVID pandemic big time. I mean, girls' education was tough enough, especially in undeveloped countries, and Afghanistan comes to mind, obviously, but we had been making some progress, but COVID has really set the girls back.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Pat, and for the answer, Congresswoman. We have a question next from one of your constituents, actually, who also serves as Democrats Abroad's Global Communications Director, Caroline Rowland in the UK. You want to go ahead, Caroline?
Hi, Congresswoman. I just moved to the UK from District 21 not a few months ago, probably like 15 months. Thank you so much for being on the call today. A huge fan of yours. Thank you so much for all the work that you do to help elect Democrats. A lot of politicians talk the talk, but you actually walk the walk and really go out of your way to help women get elected to Congress. I saw that firsthand. So huge fan of yours. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about next year, Florida. A lot of people say Florida isn't even purple anymore, that it's red. You've seen losses in the last few statewide elections. What do you think it's going to take for Democrats to win in 2022?
Well, first of all, Caroline, thank you for your kind comments, and hope you'll be back one day. So, I've heard those comments, and so you asked me, what is it going to take? I think number one is we've got to pass this agenda, the Build Back Better agenda in Congress. I think that's somehow our messaging of what it is, what's in it has been overshadowed by the fight on top line numbers. So that's really, what is a top line number doesn't mean anything to people. What means something to them is the extra money they're going to get in their pocket from a child care tax credit, or being able to afford child care, or take a day off to take care of a sick child without losing their pay. I mean, so these are, or being able to, for example, if we could lower the cost of prescription drugs by allowing Medicare to negotiate. See, so those are the kinds of things that hopefully we can get back on that message. I know we're trying, rather than the top line numbers. So I do think what's going to take is going to be getting this Build Back Better agenda forward. I do think that getting because so much for the Democrat success, so much of it emanates from the president. Getting COVID under control is going to be important, and but keeping in mind, as the country does better, and so will Florida. So you don't want to root against yourselves, right? So as Florida gets better, either with COVID or the economy, that does improve your incumbents' positions. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But what we're gonna have a good. I feel very happy. We're gonna have a good candidate. Whoever wins the Democratic primary against DeSantis will be a good candidate. And then a big factor will be money, whether they can match his war chest or come close enough. And so I think that, and I think Val Demings has the opportunity to bring some of the voting blocks that Democrats need to be successful. And then we got to work hard. We got to work hard on the ground as well. But no, we're not giving up now. No. And you all just remember, I mean, sometimes it's amazing when you think back to Gore v. Bush. That was like a 600 vote margin. That's crazy, right? So and if you look across the country, the margin, some of the states were very close.
Absolutely. And of course, Congresswoman, I have to make a plug for Democrats abroad here. That said, the agricultural position for Nikki Fried when she ran, that is one of many races where the votes from abroad tipped the scales. So a plea to all Floridians listening, and really to anyone listening who's American abroad overseas, get those ballots in. That's one way that we can help flip these seats at all levels of government.
Oh, absolutely. And there'll be some critical House races and state races. So yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
I wonder if I could interject a relevant question from Facebook that just came in from the chat box here by Jane November Herman, who says, how will the new voting legislation in Florida impact our votes from abroad? It seems that we must request a ballot every election. Lois, you are my representative, with a smile.
Okay. Well, that's, again, thank you for, they're trying to make it as difficult. The Republicans are trying to make it as difficult as possible for people to vote. But yeah, so just make sure you are requesting your ballot. I think all these voting requirements are being contested in court, but I don't know which will stand. So I would just say this: they can't stop you from voting. All right, if you want to vote, in the end, they may make it more difficult, but make sure you're requesting your absentee ballot and you're getting it in a timely fashion. Don't wait for it to be sent to you. And you can go online to your Supervisor of Elections page and request your ballot. That's what you should do.
Great. Thank you so much. And I love what you said there. There is an element of persistence, especially in some of these states where we see Republican state government, Republican governors. we're working at Democrats Abroad, establishing this concept of state teams that Carol's spearheading with the Florida state team to look at legislation, specifically at the state level where a lot of the election law is determined, the deadlines, for example. So that's one avenue where we would love to have you be involved. I plugged that link into the chat. Again, votefromabroad.org. That's where you can find all of the deadlines, the how-tos about how you can make sure that your vote counts next year. You'll have to turn in a new ballot request at the start of the year in January, but you can mark your calendars now and get that out of the way, and you will be set to elect great Democrats up and down the ticket in Florida. I think we have another Florida voter with a question for you, Congresswoman, Rajib Senagupta. Rajib, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Congresswoman. So I was in India, but just got back to my home at St. Augustine. So sadly, getting all the cable news. I have noticed a huge change in my neighborhood, means among friends, colleagues, who were GOP voters, very conservative, but were a good sport to listen all my liberal progressive rants, right? So, but it's no more. In fact, the situation got quite worse, specifically after COVID, and it's becoming more and more partisan, right? So the Build Back Better bill is just termed as a 3.5 trillion bill. So keeping in mind for 2022 election, the way you explained at the very initially, what the Democratic leadership can do to make sure that the perception is changed for good in Democrat favor. It's not a $3.5 trillion bill, but it has several real benefits which impact everyone.
Yes. Well, thank you. I agree with you. Really, the focus on the, although I have to say this, of course, it's important that what the top line is. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's not important, but it's not the most important. It shouldn't be the most important part of our messaging, because what's most important is what's in the package. And and what is it going to do for people? Because you can, there's a somewhat of a debate going on. Do we do fewer things with a bigger impact, or do a lot of things with a lesser impact? Do you, for example, fund something for 10 years, or you fund something for 5 years, or you fund two things for 5 years? Because it's a spending package, and so there's nothing that we can do in there that is necessarily indefinite, but you try to create a package that will have such a dramatic and positive impact that it would be difficult for further Congresses to take it away.
Yeah.
So that's part of trying to figure out, what do you keep in, what, if anything, can you take out, what can you say, what do you need, for example, in the childcare and the home care industry. Right now, there's two main problems, or three main problems in those industries. Number one is we don't have enough workers, in part because of COVID, and in part because the wages are so terrible. There are certain parts of our country where we say they're care deserts. You just don't have childcare facilities. And then, of course, it's the cost. I mean, in some parts of the country, you might as well send your 2-year-old to college at this point, right? And keeping in mind that for most parents, they earn the least, the lowest part of their income years is usually when their children are the youngest. And so that's why, for me, focusing on getting the children off to a good start. And I should add that part of the child care piece would be a universal pre-K for 3 and 4 years old. which would cut across the board. There'd be no income, valuation. So that's also a very, very big piece of the Build Back Better. So yeah, I think, right. I mean, we're trying to talk about what's in it, not the cost, because here's the other thing on the cost. And another important part of Build Back Better. It is going to be paid for. It's not going to be, it's going to be paid for by raising taxes on corporations, some who are paying nothing, and on the very, very wealthy. And the president has said repeatedly that there'll be no taxes raised on anyone making more than $400,000 a year. So we haven't seen or voted yet on the taxing piece, but I know what and the reason for that, I could just tell you strategically, the leadership doesn't want to get people voting on any part of the taxes until we know that that's what it's going to be. Because, they're saying that why should you vote for a tax increase on something that isn't even going to pass?
Yeah.
But I do think it's going to be very, very fair and very, very impactful. And so, and I can also tell you in polling, we have polled these issues, and probably the most popular part of the Build Back Better is the tax fairness piece, that people are saying, yeah, corporations should pay their fair share. So yeah, I agree with you. Let's just keep focusing on what's going to be in it and not the ultimate price tag.
Yeah, so means that's one of the things. What's because I am on the ground right now, and I have been on the 2020 campaign. I have campaigned for in 08 and 12 also. Between 16, I was in India, and this time was the first time when Duval County got maximum Democrat got majority, which is unheard of. But I have gone to some of the other places like Miami, Southeast Florida. In most of the places, the messaging what you just mentioned in this one is somehow not getting penetrated to the ground. Everyone is thinking that either Biden administration or the leftist Democrats are trying to shove something down their throat, and it's basically a government takeover. So someone from UK just commented, and the ground mood, I don't want to raise alarm, but it is that, and with some of the things that going on in some other part of the country, like the Texas laws and what DeSantis is doing, it's creating a lot of bipartisanship, and the division actually helps the conservatives, the GOP, more than us.
Well, thank you for those observations and for all your work on the ground there, Rajiv. I think we have a few more questions, and we'd like to get in before the hour. Anne, do you want to go ahead and ask the next one?
Okay.
Or intro the next one.
As I said, we have many wonderful action teams on the Global Women's Caucus. I'd like to introduce Marnie Delaney, who lives in France and votes in California, and she's the chair of the GWC Disability Task Force, and she's on our team leading the Violence Against Women Committee. So Marnie?
Unmute. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. I do that every single time. So thank you for being with us, Congresswoman. And you mentioned women's international issues. And 14 years ago, then Senator Biden introduced the Violence Against Women Act, the International Violence Against Women Act. And I think given the 9 million Americans living around the globe and the pre-COVID 93 million who travel around the globe, we feel, Democrats abroad is feeling fairly urgently that both the Violence Against Women Act and the International Violence Against Women Act we would really like to see them be passed. And so we wondered, in your estimation, what the heck it would take to get them passed and what we can do to help. Please don't say it's impossible.
No, I wouldn't say that. You know, it's a coincidence, but the Zoom that I was on right before I jumped onto this one was with Anita Hill. The Women's Caucus had a session with her, and very, very, really interesting, because she still does. She now works. She's a professor at Brandeis University in Massachusetts,
Right.
and she focuses a lot on violence against women. And one of the questions we asked her was, you know, what more can the Women's Caucus do? As you have mentioned, you know, we as you know, probably, we passed an updated Violence Against Women Act in the House.
In the House. Sure.
Now, let me just tell you how sinister the Republicans are. Whenever they did this with the Violence Against Women, and they also did it with Women's Health Protection Act. They bring all their women members who sit there during the debate and lead the effort to oppose. They actually had the woman leading the debate. This is really crazy. The woman leading the debate for the Republicans started off by telling people she was a victim of domestic violence. So we got, I don't know if we got any, maybe we got a few Republican votes on it. And the reason that they were so, the legislation protects domestic partners. And for some reason, they do not want same-sex people to be protected. They don't want Indians. Now I say in India, on the tribes, they don't want the women who live, or men who live on tribes to be, tribe nations to be protected. It's pretty cruel. So that's where we are. The bill's in the Senate. Again, you know, they've got to find 10 Republicans who are going to vote for it.
Right. The International Violence Against Women Act, I mean, 14 years later, it hasn't seen any action.
That hasn't even percolated
Right.
in the House. Let me tell you, though, something interesting that Anita Hill, because we asked her what would be a good, you know, what would be something to focus on. This is very interesting. She thinks that there needs to be a really good study and analysis of the economic implications of domestic violence. Mm-hmm. She says they are tremendous.
Yeah.
And she thinks that would give the federal government more clout in trying to do something about it, and state governments too.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for that question, Marnie, about such an important topic. We have two more other really important topics, questions that were submitted in advance. So, okay. Congresswoman, if it's okay, we do a speed round here.
Sure.
And we asked two.
Why don't you ask both questions at the same time?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I will turn it over to Alan in Israel and then Mike in Vietnam to ask their questions, and we can cover some other important topics at once, two birds with one stone, right? Alan, go ahead, and then Mike.
Thank you. So, Congresswoman Frankel, thank you for the opportunity. So I had been an Atlantis, Florida resident in your area until August. I moved back to Israel, where I had raised my family before moving to Florida 6 years ago. So things are changing in the US, in Israel, in the world. Hopefully we're going in the right direction. Now, the new administration in Israel came about after 3 elections that did not bring results, but finally the 4th one brought a coalition government. It's led by Naftali Bennett presently. It's going to be a rotation with Yair Lapid, 2 politicians with different viewpoints. And then there are other parties in the coalition which extend all the way from right to left. And this is the first time in Israel's 73-year modern history as a democratic state that an Muslim Arab party is part of the government. So the question is, how do you see now the new government and the the US administration, the Biden administration, being able to work together moving forward?
Okay, thank you. Marnie, give me 1 minute break just to tell my next, I'm gonna be a little late because I want to give you the time you need, okay? I'm just gonna let them know that I'll be a little late. Okay, hold on. Be right with you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question, Alan. As I said, we are covering a wide spectrum of important topics today, many of which, again, as we've talked about, are going to be front and center in this coming year with Democrats abroad, with the Democratic Party. Again, if you're listening either on Facebook or as a part of this Zoom, I invite you to become a part of what we're building at democratsabroad.org/join. And you can also find volunteer opportunities, donation opportunities to really get involved from abroad. I think the spectrum, again, on this call, we have people calling in from Vietnam and South Korea and Germany and Mexico. We really are a global organization, and it's really empowering when you see so many Americans abroad coming together and taking action on issues that are so critical, not just to our lives, but really to our friends and our family back at home. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We have some important questions still coming from the Congresswoman, and we'll give her just another moment.
While we're waiting for the Congresswoman, I thought I might just let you know that there are lots of really great, oh, she's here.
Here. So we had the question concerning how
Israel.
working with Israel in this coming term.
Okay,
And then Mike,
great.
if you wanted to ask your question as well. To
Yeah,
bring us
sure.
home.
Alan, thanks for the question. You know, I consider myself a very strong supporter of the American-Israel relationship. I'm glad to see that Israel finally got a government. But I've learned not to be careful about criticizing other governments after the one we just experienced the last few years. Listen, I know that Joe Biden has always been a friend of Israel. So I am very hopeful that the relationship will continue to be a good one. You know, it was under the Obama administration that the 10-year agreement, that's the 10-year spending agreement, was signed that covers Israel's security and the Iron Dome. So I don't see any reason that wouldn't continue. And I try to promote that the relationship between Israel and the United States should not be used as, Israel should not be a political football. I think I've seen that happen lately. It's very discouraging because it does not do any country really any good to make it a partisan issue. You do not want to have to depend on support, in this case for Israel, depending upon what parties in power. Okay, next question. Got it?
Take it away, Mike.
Hi, Representative. The first thing I'd like to say is I would like to thank you for your hard work on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. The work that committee does is incredibly important to our community, especially those of us who live abroad. My question for you is that We have a number of overseas veterans who are finding that they're unable now to use their post 9/11 GI Bill benefits at overseas universities. And we've learned that many of these universities, including prestigious ones like Oxford, are cutting ties with the GI Bill and the VA over new onerous requirements that have been imposed by the VA and in part, we believe, by the January 2021 Isaacson-Roe bill, including requirements that they get a US tax ID number and a US bank account to receive tuition payments, and requiring some information from schools that we believe violates privacy laws in the EU, Australia, UK, so on and so forth. Have you and the HVAC identified these issues for veterans living overseas? And what might the committee do about it to try and bring some relief to overseas veterans? And I'm happy to share all the information that we've gathered on this with your staffers afterward.
Well, that's terrific. Mike, I'm assuming that you're a veteran.
Yes.
Okay, what was your service?
I served for 8 years in the Navy.
Okay, well,
as an enlisted sailor.
Thank you so much for that. Well, you can see my veteran is right over my shoulder there. Ben, my son Ben was in the Marines for 8 years. He's home safe, but he was I think that was either in Iraq or Afghanistan. We see him that. So I keep the veterans are near and dear to my heart. Yes, to answer your question directly, the committee staff they are aware of these issues. Have requested a meeting with the VA to see why the changes were made and to see if legislative action is necessary. And I want to thank you. If you put your, or maybe Carol, somebody can help me. If you can get me your contact information.
I've sent it, Lois.
You did? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Felicia has it.
Okay,
And,
good.
Mike will definitely facilitate it.
Okay, so that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you for that offer.
Yep.
Okay, well, Representative Frankel, thank you so much for spending some of your really valuable time with us. We know how busy you are, and I hope you know how much we Americans abroad appreciate your spending some of this valuable time with us. So thank you so much. But we'll let you go now and get back to the business of saving our country for us. So thank you so much.
Just so you know, you are my business, all right? and
we're in the business of supporting you too.
Yeah. Anyway, it was great to be with you all. Thank you for what you're doing and to understand. It's so good that you're keeping your country close to your heart. We need you. We need every vote. And Carol, I hope I see you soon. You're going to be back in Florida soon?
I'll be back in December and I'll get on your schedule. And thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
We're going to be pushing to elect Democrats.
Thank you so much.
Take care,
to all
everybody.
of you, thank you. And to all of you who are still here, I'd like to thank every single one of you who joined us on the call today and remind you that the GWC has a full program of online events and actions coming up, including several more activities around our month-long Feminist Literature Fest and a talk with Dr. Colleen McNicholas of Planned Parenthood in Missouri, the last Planned Parenthood, the last place to get an abortion in Missouri. So please follow the link in the chat box to find out more about these and other Women's Caucus events. We'd really love to see you there. And yeah, although we couldn't get to all the questions today, we will be sending them along to the representative's office. Candace?
Great, thank you so much, Anne. Again, a huge shout out to you and the whole Global Women's Caucus, as well as to Carol Moore and the Florida State team for organizing today's event. Of course, to the Congresswoman and all of her staff, and to all of our panelists and attendees for asking your fantastic questions. I hope that you've enjoyed this event. I hope that we will see you back at one soon. Hopefully see you volunteering with Democrats abroad and voting in 2022. I can only encourage you to please consider stepping up to become a volunteer with us. You can find the link in the chat box where you can get in touch with Anne and the Global Women's Caucus, and that address is gwc-volunteer@democratsabroad.org. Your support, be it volunteering or donating, really goes a long way. Also encourage you, if you enjoy the event today, to support our cause by going to democratsabroad.org/donate so that we can continue to bring even more events like these to Americans like you all around the world. But for now, I'd just like to say again, thank you to everyone who made this event possible. Last but not least, you didn't see her, but Sammy helping with the tech and everything behind the scenes to make sure it went smoothly. So a huge thank you to everyone who helped and to all of you who attended. Very much looking forward to seeing you again at an event soon. Thanks everyone and have a great rest of your day.